Hello, welcome to Convergent Dialogues. This is Xavier Bonilla. On this episode, I am very happy to bring the conversation I had with Arlie Hochschild. Arlie is a writer and Professor Emeritus of Sociology at the University of California-Berkeley. It's also where she earned her PhD. She is quite the force in all things sociology and even social psychology. Much of her interests have been in social relationships with politics, emotion, and culture. She is the author of numerous books, including the bestseller Strangers in Their Own Land, Anger and Mourning on the American Right. It's a fantastic book. And the most recent, which is also fantastic, is Stolen Pride, Loss, Shame, and the Rise of the Right. And that's what we talk about in the conversation. So the book is really about, she's in Appalachia in eastern Kentucky here in the United States, and she uses the framework of the emotions of pride and shame, which I thought was really, really important and really interesting to do. We talk about the political right in Appalachia and this framework of these social emotions. We talk about what the kind of loose demographic makeup of the population in Appalachia is, what the current challenges are there. We briefly summarize the emotions of pride, shame, and guilt. We talk about what the appeal is of the far right, immigration and nationalism, where Democrats and liberals have lost their way with talking to and being for the working class, how we can repair some of the political divides in the country, especially within Appalachia in this region, and many other topics. As I say in the conversation, I live right here at the edge in Appalachia. I wasn't born here or raised here, but I've lived here for a few years now. And I think it's important that we don't forget big blocks of people, big groups of people. We talk to everybody. And I think there is so much work that needs to be done in Appalachia as we continue to move into the future and as we modernize, and we can't abandon our fellow citizens. So it's important work what she's doing. She's looking at really the emotions, kind of the structural elements that are there. You know, we talk about pride and dignity and feelings of, tough feelings of shame and that are really difficult to deal with, and many of the challenges. So I found her work very, very helpful, really good insights, and really the tone in which she approaches these things of understanding, curiosity, and compassion is just really spectacular. As always, you can find this conversation and all other conversations at convergentdialogues.substack.com. Also on YouTube, so like, subscribe, share with your friends. And now I bring you Arlie Hochschild. I am here with Arlie Hochschild. Arlie, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I'm very honored to have you on here, and I'm very much looking forward to speaking with you. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, thanks. It's a big pleasure. You have written a kind of masterful, I should say, really, really just a fantastic book that I really, really enjoyed. And I think it's essential reading for a lot of folks nowadays. The book is called Stolen Pride, Loss, Shame, and the Rise of the Right. And of course, you've written the bestseller, Strangers in Their Own Land previously, and many other great books. So I am excited to talk with you about the new one, Stolen Pride. Before we do, can I just give people a kind of snapshot of who you are? I guess your professional life, anything relevant that you want to say, but just kind of the snapshot of who you are. Yeah.
Hi, folks. I'm Arlie, and I really love getting out and listening to people's stories. That is a great pleasure for me, and I think through stories. Professionally, I'm a sociologist, and it's led me to write 10 books, and this is the latest.
That's nice. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, well, I think the art of narrative is super important, and it's good to tell people other people's stories. And I think that's or let them tell their stories themselves, and be a kind of conduit for that, which is what you do in the book. So there's a lot of angles here on this, and so I'm just going to ask, a few kind of lead up questions here, which is, I guess, what was the main purpose you were doing here? You're looking at the rise of the kind of the right and even extreme right in Appalachia. So it's no secret. I've told people on the podcast before that I live right here in Appalachia, just at the edge of it, but right in Appalachia here in Western Maryland. And you why did you want to look at this part of the country in the United States, in Appalachia, and why did you choose to see the framework of how you're looking at these stories, as you say, through the lens of loss, shame, pride? These are some tough social emotions. Why did you want to look at this population in the part of the country through this kind of lens of with these emotions?
First, this part of the country, it was almost by a fluke. I got a telephone call from Ro Khanna, who's a Democrat, represents Silicon Valley, coastal. The people he represents are, high tech folk, and he got together with Hal Rogers, who represents Kentucky 5, Congressional District 5, which is rural, Republican, and a lot of unemployed coal miners. And so the two of them, they asked me, he asked me, would you be interested to see why we got together? And why they had gotten together is that actually, the California has a lot of jobs coding cell phones, and that's what Ro Khanna was interested in. And Hal Rogers has a lot of unemployed coal miners. So this was to make a Silicon holler, basically, to create jobs, to insource jobs, and to create a blue state, red state alliance in doing that. And I thought that's exactly what I'd like to see happen in this country, especially this moment. And but even 6 years ago, when I began this project, that was an ideal. And that got me into Appalachia, where I met people that were part of this program and had gone from unemployment to a great job. They could stay where they are. They were stayers. And that got me into Eastern Kentucky. And once there, I discovered a perfect storm. That coal jobs had gone out, opiates had come in, and in 2017, there was a neo-Nazi march coming to Pikeville, and that framed the book. That's how I got there.
Yeah, that's
why
nice.
That perspective. I've always been keenly interested in the intersection of emotion and cultural life. I didn't have pride and shame particularly in mind, but I was looking for how emotions played a part. Then once I began to hear the stories, that was the emotion I heard.
That's nice, actually. I actually really like that, because you're allowing the stories to dictate, real stories to dictate what the themes are. And if you're hearing similar stories, and then you're hearing, okay, it keeps popping up, these are kind of the two prominent or prevailing emotions. That's actually more powerful, because that's saying a lot there, actually, the way you did it. So that's nice. Could you talk about this stereotype you explore in the book? Maybe just kind of give us a little bit of kind of the demographics of who we're talking about here. So when we talk about Eastern Kentucky, so I've been to Eastern Kentucky. It's very beautiful. It's very nice. Yeah, I should say, when we talk about Appalachia is a kind of a big region with the Appalachian Mountains here on the East Coast of the United States. But predominantly, usually people think of Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, Western Maryland, West Virginia, Kentucky, I guess probably Tennessee, a little bit of North Carolina, Virginia. That's usually the kind of central part. I'm sure people can yell at me about, I forgot this place, I forgot, but that's usually what people think of it. That's usually the kind of central locus of it. So yeah, tell us about this stereotype that you explore, which is rural, white, blue collar, and male. What could you tell us about the kind of general idea of the folks we're talking about here?
Right. Congressional District Kentucky 5 is the whitest and second poorest congressional district in the whole country, and has some other characteristics. Higher proportion are out of the labor force. Higher proportion are not physically well. A lot of people got injured in the coal mines. It has a high proportion of men who've succumbed to what are called diseases of despair, alcoholism, drug addiction, suicide. And so that story is interesting in itself and important in itself, but it's also important because it exaggerates what is a national story, actually, for whites without BAs. So it's an exaggerated version of the Trump supporter in the whole country, Red America. And I say that because if we look at the national story, whites without BAs have both, over the last 3 decades, fallen economically, and they've fallen in an absolute sense and also relative to whites with BAs and relative to blacks with or without BAs. That's kind of sets a stage for feeling kind of bad and feeling, gosh, why is this happening to us? What are we doing wrong? And so it's that parallel that I think is important here.
Yeah. When we talk about the landscape of Red America, conservatives of Red America, various districts, since the 70s, you mention a variety of things. Now, you can correct this if you want, but when most people think about Appalachia, they always say coal mining. And that certainly was for a long time in an industrial United States and even into a more modern age, a big part of not only a job, but also a sense of identity. But you talk about the issues that since the 70s started to kind of creep in here. And you talk about offshoring, automation, union decline, less well-financed schools. So education there is an issue. Obviously, the opioid epidemic, accidents, lower life expectancy, on and on and on. So it's a region that has become kind of plagued by some of these awful things and really taken a hard hit. So there's coal, but maybe there are other things here. Maybe just talk about this sense of work ethic and what's been going on in Appalachia, and maybe to a larger extent, Red America of sorts in these kind of rural communities, where there's external factors that are changing, but then there's also change within as well. Maybe just chat about that a bit.
Yeah, on the external side, just look at that for a minute. A lot of crises, bad news has hit America in general. That was the 2008 kind of a depression, COVID, climate change. But all of those hit blue collar and rural areas harder than they hit other places. Climate, if you don't have insurance on your house, your house is gone and it hits harder. And if you don't get inoculated, there were objectively more deaths in red states and so on. So there's first offshoring, automation, these external things that hit blue collar in rural areas. Then you have this exaggeration effect. And then you have people giving up on government and saying, you know what, neither party's really listened to us. And they're going for giving up on what we would call bureaucratic rational leaders, like Max Weber talks about different kinds of leaders, and kind of people like Biden who are saying, don't look at me personally, look at what I've done. Look at the Build Back Better bill, look at the Inflation Reduction bill, look at that. And the charismatic leader is a different kind of leader who doesn't say, look at what I've done, who just says, look at what I think, look at me. And I represent you. It's more a personal kind of leadership. So having given up on kind of regular leadership, you get a leader who leads through emotion. And that's why what we're talking about is important. So now to come back to the pride paradox. It's what emotions are there to be played on by such figure becomes, I think, a really important question for us to ask. And these coal miners have been extremely proud people, and in general, people are proud of their capacity to endure very difficult, hard circumstances. And their culture of pride is one of individualism. Look, if I succeed, that's me. I get to feel proud. But if I fail, damn, that's on me too. And I have to suffer shame. So what's happening is we've got two things going. People who have suffered a big economic hit, who are being hard on themselves by their culture of pride, saying, hey, who else is there to blame? What makes it a paradox is that if we look at the blue states, you see the opposite thing. People in happier economic circumstances who are also being a little easier on themselves because they have a circumstantial culture of pride that says, actually, there are many things that are causing what's happened to you, including offshoring and automation, all things we're talking about. So what we're looking is at this pride paradox of people who've been hard hit and are feeling all the things that make you feel shame. They are suffering what I call in the book structural shame. And so what Donald Trump, I think, has been doing is almost drilling into that shame and using it. I think, actually, that Donald Trump is a shamed person, which he had a very harsh, unforgiving father. And that would be neither here nor there. It wouldn't matter, except that it gave him special insight and sensitivity to a feeling that a whole lot of people, for structural reasons, have been suffering. So that's the territory I explore in this book.
Yeah, that's very nicely said. I like the way you describe that, because you talk about these. We can drill down on this a little bit more, pride and shame a bit, because I think it's good. But you talk about these ideas with work and identity and how they're connected and how they're related. That there's this. You're talking about this pride paradox about hard work, individual responsibility, and how it shapes their identity. And I think what you're saying is right, and I don't know if these folks or even Trump or other folks are quite necessarily aware that's what it is. But I think you're making a great point there about take Biden for example, because he's the current president and things like that. He would say, my grandpa said that, a job is, your worth. It's your sense of, esteem, and he's right on that. He is right on that. I think that does resonate with a lot of people, not just rural white class or working class white folks or working class folks. But I do agree with you. It is a lot of, well, look at all the stuff we've done. Well, look at all the things we passed. Look, I mean, it's great. And it is objectively, but it doesn't emotionally connect. And there could be a variety of reasons for that.
Yeah.
And
maybe what could deepen our conversation here is if I could just read a paragraph from a story.
Please, yeah.
A guy told me who was himself a recovering addict after 12 years as a heroin addict. He was homeless when I met him. Most extraordinary guy. He's kind of the hero of my book.
Yeah.
I was talking with him about loss. He's lived in this region of loss. Coal jobs gone, much else, bad stuff come in. And here's what he said. Shame comes gradually. How does loss affect shame? Shame comes gradually. Let me give you an example of guys around where I live. First thing, a guy gets his layoff slip and he blames the inspector, then the supervisor, then he shakes his fist at the Obama administration for putting in the Clean Air Act and adds in Biden. Then, when his unemployment runs low and his wife asks for money for groceries for the kids, he faces a hard choice. If you need money and don't have a degree, you've got to leave. But his family's here and he doesn't want to leave. That's when he starts to feel bad about himself. He looks around at the jobs on offer at $9 an hour, and he turns his nose up at what he thinks of as girly service jobs because he can't support his family on that kind of money. But then his partner says, we still need to feed the kids. So he takes the crap job, and she says, there's still not enough money for food, gas, fixing the roof. It's then that his shame begins to get stronger because now he feels the problem's on him. And if he leaves on Route 23 looking for work and comes back empty-handed, that's shame waiting for him at home. Then if he gets into drugs, take it from me, he's ashamed. That can lead to divorce and separation from his kids, and now he's on the dole. He always felt superior to others he saw on the dole, and now he's on it too. So he's ashamed about that and mad that he's made to feel ashamed. On top of that, he reads some op-ed on the Appalachian News Express calling people like him deadbeat for not supporting his family, paying taxes the town needs for sewer repair. He's not a contributor. And then, on top of that, he sees on the internet people outside the region firing insults at him as ignorant, racist, sexist, as homophobic. Now he's mad at the shamers. And by this time, he's forgotten about the shame. He's just plain pissing mad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very nice example there of a real story here. And I'll just say, just kind of on the on the emotional side. So guilt and shame, you mentioned this in the book, and this is true within the emotion research and literature, is guilt and shame are self-conscious emotions or social emotions. So I mean, emotions are all kind of social, but they're usually predicated on a certain type of sociality, not exclusively though. And usually we think of embarrassment, pride, guilt, shame, and for a long time, people thought guilt and shame were kind of the same. They were synonymous terms. And then there was some really good work, June Tagney and others in the 90s that really just were able to say, like, actually, these are pretty distinctly different. And here's how they're different. So usually guilt, you explain it really nicely in the book. And so the way I explain it is similar. Is guilt is I feel bad because I did something. It's usually action-based. And so when people feel guilty about something, I took the the Snickers from the 7-Eleven, and I feel bad because I did a bad thing. I shouldn't have done that. So usually when people feel guilty, it leads to, not always, but leads to reparative action, right? Well, I got to fix this. I return the candy bar, or I give some money, or, whatever. I volunteer at the 7-Eleven because I did a bad thing. Shame is much more complicated, and it can be more insidious in some ways. Shame is this feeling of there is something defective about my sense of self, right? This idea of wanting to just kind of crawl into a hole and be like, I'm defective. I'm the person that did something. It's not just the action, right? And so this idea of shame, while guilt usually leads to reparative action, shame usually leads to anger. So your narrative account here makes a lot of sense. If you see people that are angry, they're angry at the system, they're angry at administration, bureaucracy, federal government, all these things. They're angry. They're angry about these things. I would suspect that there is some sense, not for everyone, but some sense of shame. In some ways, there can also be some low feelings too, right? Some feelings of sadness, loneliness, and that's a hard place. That's a hard place for people to be. So it's
Right.
what you're sharing there really does resonate, because it's not hard to see that, maybe not so quickly, but this is where it can kind of lead, and that's not a good place. You don't want to be sitting in anger. You don't want to
No,
be sitting in shame.
no,
You don't want that to ossify. That's not good.
no. We all try and avoid it. And, I think of shame and guilt a little bit differently. I think of shame as the skin of the self. In other words,
Mm,
it's how we feel when we focus on how we are seen by others.
mm,
And guilt is what we feel when we focus on how we judge ourselves.
mm,
No one else has to be involved, but we think, oh man, I did a bad thing, shouldn't have stole that Snickers bar.
mhm,
Whereas shame is more, did I get seen? Oh, look at the
mhm,
look in the eye of the grocer who saw me.
mm.
So it's, I think of them as slightly different, but shame then is you're highly vulnerable
Mm,
to your perception of how others see you.
mm.
So you lose your job, you lose your role, you know, uh, you're now a quote taker. All of that weighs on you
Mm,
by how you are
mm.
seen as you feel by the outside world.
Yeah, I would agree. There is some evidence that there's feelings of, public shame, but also private shame. But typically the idea of private shame is still the same idea.
Yeah.
What if people see me? What
Right.
would they think of me? So you could be alone in your room, but that's even more detrimental, because you're going to go out into the world and you're going to have that view. But then when you're alone, that's that feelings of loneliness or loss, of saying, yeah, I'm still stuck with this feeling even when I'm by myself too, which is also very difficult.
And it's isolating.
Yes.
I think we feel shamed, we feel cut off from uh, all the hugely important feelings of being seen and loved.
Mm, mm,
Those vital. They are the the breath of life,
mm,
and we're cut off from them when we're
mm,
shamed. It's a powerful, powerful feeling that we
mhm,
do everything we can to
mm.
avoid.
I just want to make a footnote here. Many times shame is seen as a negative feeling or emotion, and I've said elsewhere that I don't see emotions as, good or bad or positive or negative. I understand the way people categorize it, but emotions are there to help us survive in the world and survive with others. But there are some pro-social elements of shame, of sorts of, how can I know this or feel this or experience this, and I can hopefully make improved decisions, or I can better myself, or things like that. But again, I want to be careful there and say that um, shame is more often than not, in the majority of time, a very difficult emotion. It's hard to go through. And when you have that, nobody should have that chronically. Nobody should have that for weeks and weeks and months and months and months. It is a really, really tough place to be in. There are, I think, if you get kind of, if you get some, microdosed elements of sorts, if you will, if you have these elements of like, okay, a little bit, that should kind of, kind of course correct a bit, but that's not what we're talking about here. But I just want to make that footnote.
Right. That's a great footnote to make. Yeah.
I would say, so the question becomes sometimes is okay, I can hear what you're saying, or I hear what you're saying. These folks have had a bad way about, things that have happened to them and stuff, but why are they turning to extremism, nationalism, Trump, MAGA? Why are they turning there? That can't be where the answers are, right? And so I want to, there's a part in your book I want to read, right? There's a fantastic, it really resonated with me. It's a brief kind of narrative of sorts. This is, you talk about it here. So this is kind of in the middle of the book, and this is the example here. So this is from you. In Strangers in Their Own Land, this is your previous book, I propose that underlying the political rhetoric and beyond statements of ideals and notions of truth, all of us hold a deep story. This is a feels as if story, a story that feelings tell. It removes judgment, it removes facts, it tells us how things feel through a story. I came to believe there is a deep story for the right and another for the left. In the right's deep story, the principal figure is a man patiently waiting in line, facing toward the American dream set atop a high hill. His feet are tired. He feels his turn should be coming up, but the line isn't moving. He's quite far ahead in line, but seldom looks back to notice how very many people, especially people of color, wait in line behind him. Then the man spots some people stepping in line ahead of him, line cutters. Who are they? They're educated women and blacks, propelled, it seems to him, by affirmative action. It's also immigrants, refugees, and well-paid public servants. Then the man sees a Democratic president waving to the line cutters. Is he encouraging them to bypass me? He wonders. In another moment of the right's deep story, someone ahead of him in line whirls around to criticize the man patiently waiting. Ignorant, sexist, racist, homophobic, redneck, the critic says. For the man in line, this is the last straw. I tried this deep story out on the Louisianans who I was then interviewing. Many responded, I love your story, or you read my mind. Others added their belief that those waiting in line are paying taxes that go to the line cutters. And when I relayed this deep story to Mayor Andrew Scott, who you mentioned previously, he said presciently, sure, that story fits us Appalachian Trump supporters too, but it doesn't say it all. You need to add a new chapter to the story that goes like this. Among the line cutters is a bully. He pushes everyone around and lets his friends cut in line and roughs them up if they complain. He's the bad bully. Then the line waiter sees a second man, full of himself, kind of mean, a bully too. He has obvious flaws, but you forgive them because he's a good bully, strong enough to push around the bad bully. He's protecting you. He's your bully. So when others criticize the second bully, you defend him, not because he's perfect, but because he's your bully. In fact, the first bully was a gang of bullies, the Democratic Party, CNN, the federal government, apart from the military, and the defenders of urban America who rudely dismissed rural America. Together they had walked away with pride and power. In a sense, the bad bully was beating up the good bully. Appalachia needed a good bully because the Democratic Party and federal government were bigger and badder. Now, I read that story, that kind of this account, and it really resonated because I do think with folks I've talked to, people I know, that resonates. That absolutely resonates. I don't know if you want to add to that or talk about some of this kind of narrative thing here. I think it would be great. It was very, very nicely done.
Yeah, I tried it out on a lot of people, and they nodded their heads. Yeah, and that's because they have felt disempowered. They haven't felt recognized, and I think recognition, feeling, look, I get you, I represent you, and even if I fail in helping you, I see you. That recognition really is important. So you say, I'll even defend a bully who recognizes me. Now, the background of this is that the current bully, Donald Trump, in his 4 years of presidency, did nothing, in fact, to help Appalachia. He promised to bring coal back. Coal continued to decline. He promised to bring in great new jobs, and he did not bring in great new jobs. What he did was to give tax breaks for the rich, and that did no good for the residents of Congressional District Kentucky 5, the second poorest district in the country. So actually, economically, he didn't, or should I call material economy, he brought them nothing. He promised to get rid of immigrants. There are very few immigrants in this area. In fact, there's an immigration out of the area. There's population decline. So that didn't help them. And yet they defended this bully because he seemed to represent people who were suffering, people who had been in this pride paradox and stuck in it, and lifting them out. Pride again. So in the material economy, gave them nothing, but in the pride economy, he symbolically seemed to them to give them something.
Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense in terms of when people say, why would they turn to somebody that's not really helping them economically? And you could say, yeah, it's just emotional voters, but that's dismissive. Those are strong emotions. Those are emotions people walk around and carry with all the time, and it has real impact. And when people say, well, the Democratic Party or liberals, they don't listen to me. I think they mean that literally, but I also think they mean that emotionally. Right? You can't come around and campaign every 4 years and be like, okay, we're going to help you out. We're going to give you all these plans and programs, and they might be good economically, but it doesn't feel. And that's an important component. I mean, the policies are obviously very important as well, but you do need that piece of it. That's very important.
Exactly. And, really the purpose of writing Stolen Pride is to help the other half of America that says, watch out for this bully. He could really take over. He could take democracy away from us all. The half of America that feels that isn't yet bilingual, isn't yet tuning in to the emotional airwave through which a charismatic leader can speak to the shame of the other half of America. In other words, there is a language being spoken every day that half of America can't hear. And I think that language is being spoken in a very strange and hugely important way. I think that Donald Trump is daily, weekly, monthly, offering America a kind of anti-shaming ritual in 4 moments. And moment 1 is Donald Trump says something transgressive. All immigrants are poisoning the blood of America, or certain immigrants are eating your pet dog or cat. Okay, that's moment 1. Moment 2, the punditry shames Donald Trump for the transgressive statements he's made. It says, what do you mean immigrants are poisoning America? We are an immigrant society, have been for hundreds of years. Or you can't say immigrants are eating our pet cats and dogs. That's a lie. You don't repeat a lie. It's simply not true. Okay, so moment 2. The punditry shames Donald Trump for his transgressive statement. Moment 3, Donald Trump becomes the victim of the shamers. Mm-hmm. And he says, oh, boy, they really are coming after me, and it hurts. It's really tough to be shamed like, this is so unfair. Haven't you felt like that? Isn't that how it feels when someone's after you? They're always putting you down. Well, I'm taking the bullet for you. I am your representative, and I'm the victim instead of you. Mm-hmm. That's moment 3. And moment 4, Donald Trump raises himself up and roars against the shamers. Why, you treasonous press, you recently has come out against Liz Cheney. I'm going to have 7, 8, 9 guns pointed at your head. It's the liberal establishment, the deep state. So the roar back. I believe that one half of America, the Democratic voting half, hears moment 1 and moment 2, that Donald Trump says something transgressive and the punditry shames him for it. And I believe the Republican half of America is tuning in to moment 3 and moment 4, where Donald Trump takes the role of victim and kindly takes on the shame of his followers and roars back symbolically at the shamers. So you have half of the country, that is the liberal half, kind of not hearing the daily appeals, I think, to shame, not understanding the catharsis involved. Why did one guy said, oh, Donald Trump is like lightning in a jar. And I asked him, what's the lightning? Help me here. I really want to understand. And I think, actually, this cathartic anti-shame ritual is a big part of that lightning that we should hear and know about so that we can talk to them in a language they can hear. And that we can understand, tune into that, and give real solutions to real problems.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. He's the living embodiment of this representative piece of them. He's an archetype of sorts. He's a self-object. It's all these types of things that I think people aren't really aware of it, and maybe he's not aware of it, right? But that's what it seems to become. And I think your 4 stages are spot on. I mean, I think that really is, and the fact that one side of one half of the country is tuned into 1 and 2, and one half is 3 and 4, and it's totally different languages they're speaking. I fully agree with that. I'm curious here. You mentioned immigrants. I wanted to talk about that. It's a hard thing, right? This is my opinion. You tell me what you think about this, but I've always felt, not even just in the U.S., I think we just see this around the world, as long as there have been nation states, kind of post-empire, is I see nationalism, and I'm not using that as a dirty word, just kind of in the general sense of what you mean, of what we mean. Nationalism and immigration are 2 sides of the same coin. Anytime we talk about immigration, we're always having a discussion about who we are as a country, what our identity is as a nation, all of these things. I always see it that way. Because as soon as you start talking about immigration and all these things, and it really, you get deep enough into that conversation, it might not even take that long. It's just like, well, that's not who we are, or that's not what this is, or my town wasn't like this, or now we got all these people coming in here, all these things. And I think that question, though, is important. And so in this case, for me, I think immigration is great. I think it's a wonderful thing, but it is one of those things where I don't think every single town and unincorporated place in the United States needs to be a United Nations either. I think there are plenty of places that should, be welcoming all these things, but I don't think every single place needs to be that way. And I can hear from people that says it almost seems like it needs to be that way. Some people say that. But and that's part of a liberal pluralism, right? Some people are going to do it differently in some places. Other people are going to do it differently in other places. But why do you see, or when you've done your research and your conversations, what is it about immigration that actually feels a particular way for some folks? Does it feel like a threat? Are they taking our jobs? Are they, all these people are getting ahead or getting progress and we're getting left behind, we're forgotten? Or is that just rhetoric? I always wonder about that, is how much of that is just, maybe some people are hiding behind that to, maybe have some hateful ideas. I'm sure that happens. But how much of that is really rhetorical, or how much of that is really actual, where it's like, no. In my town, in my city, in my whatever, it's harder to find jobs than it used to be. And the one thing I can notice is we got a lot of other people from all sorts of places from around the world. And I'm not crazy about that because I can't support myself. What's the substance there of that kind of idea, I guess?
Yeah. It's, and we're really talking about a reality, and then the physical reality and a emotional reality, aren't we? You can have a bill, and the Democrats did, that puts more money into border security, and actually wants, I think both parties really want to control the border, know what's going on. But the emotional feelings that get attached to this issue, I think, can be, of course, strong when they are fired up. But they especially are compelling for people whose predisposition is to be frightened of their own station in the world, because things have happened to shake things up. There's a really interesting study that I cite in Stolen Pride on racial prejudice, that is, prejudice whites people have against blacks. And what they found was that when economic hard times hit, racial prejudice, that it was some questions that didn't have to do with economics, but, how are blacks? What are they really like? Questions like that. When whites were facing economic strains, rates of prejudice went up. But when those strains went away, actually racial prejudice went down, that there was something circumstantial to one's ideas about, quote, how blacks are. So I think the same thing applies to immigration, and that the people I came to know, for whom, again, there were no blacks coming in, there were no immigrants coming in. A few you would see Mexican restaurants, but otherwise, and there were some Indian doctors who were brought in to an underserved area, but otherwise everybody was white. It was the whitest in the country. Um, and generally, who was there didn't suffer prejudice. It seemed to work. But I think the general story that you're focusing us on is makes us think about a person's predisposition to scary news about immigrants. And that predisposition has to do with whether you feel solidly placed or not. And the people I came to know, many of them felt that their position in life was almost melting, that their whole status system of where you get pride from, since they'd been deprived of pride, it was sort of was shaky. And I talked to a man, this is in the book too, who went to this little town in Pikeville, and there was a gay pride parade. And he said, "Oh, I saw a man dressed up as a woman. He was a trans man, and there were children who saw him." He was very upset at this. And it wasn't a matter of, are we talking about 1.5% or 2% of people in the world, and should we be nice to all people in various minorities? He felt personally threatened. And what he said to me is, look, you don't know, in this area, we're in the middle of a drug epidemic. Children have stole from their parents' pockets to support their habit. Our community has been hit by this crisis. And now you're going to ask me to be, to welcome yet another thing I have to accept. It seemed like on top of his whole sense of crisis. And that's what I mean by a predisposition. He's already worried about holding on to what he very much values and wants for his community, and thought these liberals were forcing on him tolerance, racial tolerance, immigrant tolerance, sexual minorities tolerance, that he found very unwelcome. And so that was the predisposition that he took to many social changes.
Yeah, it sounds more of like a sort of a hierarchy. I got these things I got to deal with in the immediacy, but now I'm being told this is also another really important thing, and I don't even have the bandwidth to worry about my job and the economics and this kids I'm taking money for drugs and dealing with that issue. It just sounds like it's becoming there's just not enough space to be saying. There's all these other things that it's I don't even know if it is coming from a place of hate or things like that. And it's just like I got all these other things before that, and you're telling me this is the number one thing or super important, or that I'm phobic against a group of people, and and that can feel I can imagine feel very, very difficult for people in that context. Yeah. I guess the question here is let's talk about Democrats and liberals a little bit. I have lots of criticisms, and I feel I said this to somebody recently. So as I've mentioned before, I'm a moderate liberal. I vote Democrat, and I always have. And so, I'm kind of picking on my side here. I'm kind of focus on my side of the aisle, I guess. But in the 30s, you had a coalition when FDR was president. This is the New Deal coalition. The New Deal coalition. Right. And, LBJ was, Senate Majority Leader in the 40s, putting all those bills through in the New Deal. And, Kennedy ran on that, and you had all these things, right? And all the way until Carter in '76, it was still that, he was still talking. I mean, granted, Carter was, he was a bit older, but those things where he was still talking about, let's resurrect a bit, or let's kind of keep a little bit of that New Deal, Democrat spirit and all that. So, you can draw the lines however you want here on political coalitions, but FDR built a working class coalition in the '30s that went all the way into the mid '70s, roughly, let's say. And if you're generous, 35, 40 years, you had a coalition of working class people voting one side for that's not to say they didn't vote for Republicans, but you had a new coalition that was built grassroots, ground up for our modern age, 2007, 2008, the Obama coalition, young people, millennials, people coming onto the internet and the digital age. And people talk about that multi-ethnic, diverse, women, blacks, Hispanics, working class folks. It was a big tent, and we got it all done. And I tell people all the time, people forget Obama won in the general, Iowa, Indiana, and was half a percentage point from winning Missouri, which today, 15 years later, sounds unheard of for Democrats, which is insane. How did he do that? He built this coalition, but I mean, I can't imagine how he feels. In 15 years, I'm going to say completely, but it's dissipated. It's completely splintered. And many people have written about it, and I think there's still some things to be said, but I think it can be said that it does seem that in tone, in how they emotionally connect, in their rhetoric, in their in how they're promoting things that they do, they're really a class, or they're a party for the educated elites. This class of folks that read the same stuff, listen to the same stuff, live in cities or just outside of cities. And I guess the question, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but why is it, do you think, that not only that maybe that Democrats have failed working class people in a lot of ways, but also what it would take, you think, for working class folks to not look to what Trump's selling, or some of these extreme things, and where they could feel like somebody on the other side. We got some policies that are solid, that are going to help you out here, and I can connect with you with your experience and how you feel and what's going on for you. What would it take for the left, or for the Democratic Party to really do that, you think?
Yeah. It's a great question. In the New Deal era, in the Depression, everybody was hit. And in a way, it wasn't that hard for FDR to say, hey, we're all in this together. And his fireside chats every day said, we're going to try everything we can. I'm not sure this is it, but hey, let's try this, let's try that. And it was extraordinary. He got actors and directors, unemployed, to put on plays for people who'd never seen plays before, and in many languages. But it wasn't the same as what we're dealing with now, which seems to me, as we've discussed, the aftermath of post-1970s offshoring, automation, which hit the blue-collar class, the industrial workers of America, much harder than it hit others. because their industries were carted off to Mexico and China, and they were left high and dry. So it divided us. Some were hurt more than others, but at the same time, the Democratic Party has really failed to say, "Hey, we're the party for anyone who's hurt, and whoever that is, if we're for all of America." So I agree with you that there's a lot of repair work to be done, and I'm just hoping that after this election, we get a chance to do it, because the Democratic Party's been really in denial, I think, for about 2 decades.
Yeah. I said this other thing, I said this thing that I think would be amazing. And it's sad that it's a fantasy and not something I think will happen. But, if Kamala does end up winning, and let's say, she has, one chamber or not, or whatever, or maybe not, neither at all, the House or the Senate. If I was her, and if I was on that administration, in the first 100 days, I would do a speaking tour. I would do some rallies, some speeches, whatever, do the online stuff in deep red America. And I would go to all those places and I would say, "Hey, listen, you didn't vote for me, and that's okay. I sincerely am your president. I'm here for you. I want to earn your vote back. I want to see how can I listen to what's going on for you, and I want you to tell me, directly. Do some town halls, do all things, and in a listening tour, and really do it, not pander and all these things, but really do it, and I don't know, maybe put a task force together, get some ideas, whatever. That's fine afterwards, but really try to connect there. I mean, that would be fantastic. I mean, it would be fantastic. Maybe there's some criticism, but what do you have to lose by doing that?
That's right. I'm a woman, but hey, half of America is male, and I am your president and your voice. And here's,
I mean, it's I don't know. So we'll see how it all shakes out. So I guess the last thing I want to ask you here is for many, economics is the start and the end point, right? Democrats and Republicans might have some things in common in terms of they care about their family. People want to work. They want to work hard. They want to take care of their family. Be good people in their community. There's some good values there on both sides for sure. And yet there's a lot of division, right? There's a lot of division because I think people aren't listening. They're speaking different languages. They're not attuned to kind of these things, as you say, nicely, structural shame and things like that. So how do you feel there can be this kind of repair, regardless of how things work out politically, with people, right? Where people can talk to folks, in Appalachia, where you did this book, or in the South, and in previous book, or other places where people can be interested and be curious and say, no, I don't agree with them, and we didn't vote the same, but that's still my fellow American. That's still my fellow citizen, and I'm curious what's going on for them, and not give these kind of just ugly ways of name calling and stuff. What do you think is that way we repair?
That's a great question. We used to have 2 institutions that mixed people of different classes and races together. We used to have labor unions, which were the real middleman between the working class and the Democratic Party, but it's now down to 9% in the private sector of people that are unionized. So we've got to make up for the absence of that. We've got to either build unions back or build an equivalent. We used to also have the compulsory draft, where people of different walks of life got really to know each other and appreciate each other. So we need to make up new structures. And I see, there are, let me tell you a funny story. When I was doing my previous book, Strangers in Their Own Land, about the rise of the right in the South, based in Lake Charles, Louisiana, there was a guy who went around with me to meet all the people that I met. He was a terrific guy. And he came back, a young college graduate, and started something called the American Exchange Project, which gets high school students in their last semester of school who are in the South to get to know high school seniors in the North and spend 2 or 3 week vacation in each other's communities. And he's got South together with North. It's now in 35 states. And coastal kids to go inland, inland kids to go coastal. It's called the American Exchange Project. And I met a man, I got a call, a letter from a man who had read Strangers in Their Own Land. And the letter began, I have read your book. Everyone in it represents, is similar to those I serve in my small evangelical church in Kilgore, Texas. You described me. And it went on. And then it said, but Donald Trump is a scary, divisive figure. I would never vote for him. He's not a Christian. And then he ended it. So imagine the good news, reading your book, written by someone from all places, Berkeley, California. Well, I wrote him back. Thank you for your kind words, and ended, your friend from Berkeley, California. We are now friends. And both this reverend from Kilgore, Texas, and I are on the board of this thing this young guy has started, the American Exchange Project. So that's an example of the kind of new structure, it's no end all and be all, that we need to put on a massive scale, because there really are wonderful people in all sectors of America. You and I know that. And we're in a culture that is leading one side to vilify the other. And I think each side knows that's happening, but it seems inescapable. I should also say that I think there are many leaders at the state level who, if they were part of this discussion, would agree, and some of them are acting on it. I think that Andy Beshear, who is now the Democratic governor in a red state of Kentucky, has done an astonishing job. And he is very well loved, and he has brought a lot of prosperity to northern Kentucky and western Kentucky. Unfortunately, not so much eastern Kentucky. But he's a kind of a model of a leader that I think we need more of.
I would agree with that. Arlie, what can I say? This is such a wonderful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Really, really, really good stuff. You have such wonderful ideas. Your book is great, and so I'm greatly looking forward to the next one. And I'm really just championing you on with all the hard work you do. So big thanks for coming on here and sharing your wisdom. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. I've loved this. It really, it's really been great.
Of course.
My privilege. Yeah.
Of course.